with only 6 days to the election. Leading up to the election, the past 2 weeks has been a barrage of news cycles that, of course, I have covered and have not covered. Most recently, the Hunter Biden scandal, which we are seeing more and more news pour out. We're seeing more and more censorship and denial of the story being authenticated. Although the FBI has now come out and said that the emails are in fact real. Numerous photos of Hunter Biden exposing himself disgustingly and other things that I will not talk about, such as underage girls and things like that sort, have now come out on different various platforms, as well as a Chinese news site. But now we are looking at 6 days until the election. Amy Coney Barrett has just been confirmed as the Supreme Court Justice, third nominated Supreme Court Justice in the Trump administration. The left is freaking out. Yes, they have gone completely mad over Amy Coney Barrett's election, I guess you would call it, in the Senate, being elected to be part of the Supreme Court Justice, which is absolutely great. And in this episode, we are going to talk about that, address that, predictions for the election. What do I think? What will the Electoral College map look like? Well, all that ahead and more in this next episode. Final confirmation of the Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett. We have to take a look at everything from different angles and a legal perspective, obviously, because there's a lot at stake. The Democrats are worried that Obamacare, number one, is going to be repealed and replaced, which is a very, very understandable possibility. So we understand why they're freaking out. Now, the Democrats also have opposed this nomination from the beginning. Keep in mind, the Republicans, like Lindsey Graham, were a bit hypocritical when they said that Obama should not confirm a Supreme Court justice the year of the election, and then turned around and have done it.
Cruz or Donald Trump get to be president, they've all asked us not to confirm or take up a selection by President Obama. So if a vacancy occurs in their last year of their first term, guess what? You will use their words against them. I want you to use my words against me.
However, the president wasn't the president at the time. Donald Trump was not the president at the time. And now he is, and things have changed and shifted in a way that we could not imagine. The left is on full attack. And again, when I say the left, I always have to emphasize there are good Democrats out there who are still ignorant to the corruption going on within the party. There's also good liberals out there, as in liberal classical neoliberals, as I always talk about, the constitutionalist liberals, JFK era kind of type-esque freedom of thought liberals, not the thought police liberals like we're seeing right now in mainstream media, social media, big tech giants, and so on and so forth. Now, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have definitely opposed this so-called court nomination, and even rumors of them packing the courts have been about. And just today, Nancy Pelosi suggests Supreme Court packing and districts. She also said today in another news cycle, this is Tuesday, October 27th, just less than 7 days away from the election, that she will be running again if the Democrats maintain the House, what they are projected to do. However, the president in his debate, which we will get into a really small debate recap in a little bit here, just recently stated that he thinks that the Republicans are going to take both the House and the Senate, which is kind of unlikely from a realist kind of perspective, but it's good to be optimistic, I guess. Now, Nancy Pelosi suggesting, I will bring up the article now, as you can see, that they might be Supreme Court packing is just absolutely insane. Packing the max amount of judges to outnumber the current conservative appointed judges, not necessarily conservative judges in a sense. Even Justice Roberts, who is considered a conservative judge, has very liberal decisions that he has been making in the recent past 2 years, as well as Mr. Justice Gorsuch has not always favored the president's policies as well. But the judges' job is to ensure that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are upheld in a legal and just manner of the United States courts. They are the ones who are in charge of the separation of power. And if something as crazy as Supreme Court packing is going to come about, if there is a Biden-Harris administration, or a Harris-Biden administration, as I always like to address it, then that is very dangerous ideology. In fact, there could be a bias within the separations of government. Yes, I said a bias. Now, the liberals are accusing, well, I won't say liberals because they, again, we know they are no longer liberal. They are considered far left, are now saying the same thing with Amy Coney Barrett, that she has a bias, that she is going to be biased to the separation of power, which is not necessarily true. But court packing may seem a little biased, in my opinion, and it could be very dangerous. In fact, let's take a look at this article here of what Nancy Pelosi is suggesting right here. And Joe Biden's latest suggestion, again, is saying that he wants to reform the high court district and court system, which is very dangerous because this violates everything we talk about on the fight for liberty, upholding the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the separation of powers within the executive and judicial branch, so on and so forth, the three branches of government. Now, this is very dangerous when it comes to those particular branches of government, of the judicial branch of government, and the executive, because those are supposed to be very, very far apart. Now, the other branch of government, the legislative branch, actually, is a little bit more in working unison with the executive branch, as we know, because they have to pass bills and so on and so forth. Now, the judiciary branch is supposed to really separate those powers and keep those powers separated. But when you suggest reforming the court as an active president in the executive branch, that is threatening the very thing that separates each branch of government. To me, that is going too far into the violation of our Constitution by rewriting history, rewriting what the founders established. And Joe Biden even went as far as saying that the founders never achieved what they actually wanted to achieve for America, suggesting that America was a failure recently. He also cited the founding fathers in a recent debate with the president and said that they put a great system in place. So if they put a great system in place, Mr. Former Vice President Joe China Biden, why on earth are you going to change the court system if these founding fathers, who were geniuses, by the way, except for, of course, I always ripe on the founding fathers for not putting term limits in. That's my only thing I have against the founding fathers. Otherwise, they made a completely perfect, almost perfect, 99% perfect system. But if this system is so perfect, and that Joe Biden thinks that the founding fathers had a great system in place, why on earth are you thinking about reforming the courts? And suggesting that is a very threat to our constitutional republic, Mr. Biden. That's what I don't understand here. Pelosi said that she also said not just reforming the justice Supreme Courts, but also other courts. And that is very dangerous, such as district courts. In 1876, there were 9 justices on the court. Our population has grown immensely since then. Basically changing what we originally had in 1876 after about 100 years after Washington was fighting for independence and we finally declared independence. Ridiculous to suggest something like that about 100 years after Washington was president as well. And it's ridiculous to suggest something like that because that violates our very constitutional republic, our very rights, our very Bill of Rights, the way things were written. And you're suggesting to reform and pack the courts, which is just something that hasn't happened in 200 years, such as what they really want to do is all kinds of different new things. Again, this goes back to the progressive ideology of them, of having their way with certain things. Now, I believe personally that what they are doing is reforming into a more socialist system, but they also want to take away this flag. They want to redo the flag basically by putting, by putting 2 new states onto the flag. So are we going to have the classical American flag anymore, or are we going to have a new flag? A flag that has 52 states, which includes Washington, D.C., and as well as Puerto Rico, which they're trying to do. Senator Chuck Schumer suggested this just a couple months ago. See for yourself. But anyways, this is just totally insanity from these Democrats, and really just mainly just an attack, a full-fledged attack or a retaliation of assigning Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who I wasn't exactly at first too crazy about, because I was a little bit skeptical of some of her decisions when it came to constitutional rights, with lockdowns, things like that. I'm very pro open the country. Now, we could do it safely. I believe that we could do things safely and open the country safely and keep the country open safely. Now, you can go and protest, but you can't go to church, and you can go to Walmart. But we already talked about COVID-19. There's a spike in cases. We're testing more, so on and so forth. The mortality rate is down. So we have to be realistic with this. COVID-19 is not a hoax, folks. It's a real virus, but is the threat very real? That is a question that remains to be challenged and continues to be challenged. Is the threat really that high for people who are young, people who are anywhere from young children to about 65 years old? Is there a real threat to those people? And so far, the data suggests otherwise. Now, that's why I think we need to reopen the country. Now, masks are a separate constitutional issue. Everybody should, I'm not going to give my personal opinion on masks. I think people should be cautious. I think, if it's spread through respiratory droplets, maybe masks are effective, maybe they're not. 85%, a new study from the CDC said people who have gotten COVID, 85% of them still wear masks. So what is actually going on? We need to take the data, we need to break it down, and we need to maybe reform what we're going to do with COVID-19 instead of just saying that lockdowns, shutdowns, and everything is the answer. And it's obviously not if Fauci says that we're going to be locked down until 2021 or 2022, which is absolutely absurd and ridiculous, which will see a huge amount of hunger within the United States, and it'll begin to rise even more than it is now. And everybody's struggling in some way financially, I think. And it's absolutely absurd and ridiculous. That's why I think a new stimulus is needed, and still they're playing politics. The Republicans and the Democrats are both playing politics when it comes to stimulus still. And I expect a huge stimulus package at the beginning of the year or after the election. If President Donald Trump is reelected, a stimulus will be signed in late November. If Joe Biden is reelected, we might not see a stimulus until February, which is really ridiculous. And maybe Trump does a stimulus before he leaves. Who knows if he loses the election? We're going to talk about the election in just a moment, folks, but bear with us. We're talking about Amy Coney Barrett, the Supreme Court Justice, and her suggestions. I've heard a lot that she's more with the not trying to sound like a hypocrite and say that they shouldn't attack her religion and stuff like that, but she's more aligned with the Pope and so on and so forth in the Catholicism side of things, which is fine. But where does the Pope stand with abortion? Where does he stand with things like that? That's what we have to, we do not need a justice that is going to base everything off of the Pope's ideology. But it's great that she is religious, and that is very important and essential into her morals and how she upholds herself as a Supreme Court justice, and not only as a Supreme Court justice, but as a woman. And as, again, like I said, in a legal perspective, that's good because we know she will be fair and she will be just, which we need. And that's what this constitutional system of separation of powers and the three branches of government were set up to do, is to uphold the Constitution. And, you know, not go, if the president does something, let's say the president, current president Donald Trump does something wrong, our president, if he does something wrong, he needs to be held accountable for that, and it needs to be overturned with the Supreme Court. There's no problem with that. If there's something illegal happening with Joe Biden and there's an investigation and the Senate or the House try to block it, the Supreme Court could go and, of course, overturn that. And that is why the Supreme Court was established in this government. That's why we have the three separation of powers in the government: executive, legislative, and judicial branch, which is very important and essential to our constitutional republic. But them saying that they want to pack the courts and continue and have a court reform is a very violation of the three branches of government. As I said before, the president should have no authority to do that. He should have no legal authority to do that. And the last president to do that was FDR, who found himself in the midst of a scandal for court packing, or well, trying to pack the court. Have to look at the history myself. I'm a bit uninformed in that aspect of that, but I do know that there was a scandal involved with him trying to pack the courts. Whether he was successful or not, I don't know that part of the history on that, but I do know that's what happened with him. He was involved in a scandal with trying to pack the courts. I think it should be highly illegal for the president to have any authority over the judiciary part of the courts, other than appointing those who he wants to appoint in the courts, like we have established for so many years. Now, again, Kamala Harris said that, which has been debunked by the Washington Post, that Abe Lincoln decided not to do his nomination for the Supreme Court justice because it was an election year, which turns out to be false. And actually, what actually happened is that Lincoln didn't have a Senate to approve the hearing and have the justice confirmed. So that's what actually happened. And so there was a little white lie during the debate with Mike Pence when it comes to election year with Abraham Lincoln and deciding whether or not to have a Supreme Court justice fill that seat. 29 times before, including our greatest, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, probably the greatest, in my opinion, my favorite president to ever walk on this earth, the man, the genius, the myth, the legend, Mr. George Washington also had filled the seat during his re-election year. So there's that too. I mean, it started from the very first president of the United States, Mr. George Washington, General President George Washington, the great George Washington. It started with him. If he did it, why is the current president of the United States not allowed to do that? Why isn't President Trump allowed to do that? That's my question to you, Kamala Harris. Stop being a hypocrite. Stop acting like this hasn't happened before, because we know damn well that it has happened before. And history shows that. And your Abraham Lincoln myth is that. It is exactly a myth. So as we go on to Amy Coney Barrett, and we're talking about the Supreme Court and the separation of powers, we remember that it's essential to our government. And I believe that, like I said, the president should have no authority to reform the courts or pack the courts. It should completely be up to the House, the Senate, and the separation of powers, whether or not it should be up to everybody. But see, the House and the Senate could get involved if they're Democrats. I don't think the executive branch should be involved in it. In my full opinion, I think that should be against the Constitution and constitutionally not legal. And a lot of scholars and constitutional scholars really are looking at this closely and saying, is this constitutionally legal for the executive office, the executive branch office, particularly if it was a Harris-Biden administration or Biden-Harris, however it turns out in the end, is this constitutionally legal? Is this legal to pack the courts, to do this? And many are questioning it and saying, no, it's not really legal, you know? And of course, there's always loopholes that they can go through to surpass the Constitution, as we've seen with these lockdowns with Governor Whitmore and various governors across the United States. So we've seen that. We've seen these governors go through these loopholes to surpass the Constitution and being overruled by the Supreme Court justice. So we've seen that continually play out, which is crazy because it's played out in various ways. And I think it's crazy because the Supreme Court protects the Constitution. They're the ones that decide what is constitutional or not. So the executive order, in essence, packing the courts, reforming the courts, is a direct hit of saying, hey, we're throwing out the Constitution. We're throwing out the Bill of Rights. We're done with that. So that's kind of scary, and it's very dangerous rhetoric to be pushed. And people always say, well, this is dictator. The president, Trump, is such a dictator. He's such a dictator. He's such a dictator. This is true dictatorship. Folks, the party that wants to censor you, take your First and Second Amendment away, as well as take the very branches of government away or reform them, that is dangerous rhetoric. That is a clear violation of a dictatorship or a communist socialist government that is being implemented upon our very society. So that's where we have to decide as voters. Do you want to stand for something that is not with the Constitution, or are you just full-blown anti-American anarchy communist and saying, you know what, forget it. We're going to reform everything. That's really what it comes down to, folks. But going past the Supreme Court justice and into the very election, I have developed a prediction map that I may or may not change. Right now I feel pretty good about the decision I've made, but I am questioning whether or not this election could be closer than we think, because the voter turnout, of course, is obviously going to be more than 2016. My election predictions I'm currently showing on the screen, and I have it in my handheld right here, but I will go over it with you right now on the screen, as you can see. Now, I'll go over this briefly so it doesn't take up almost the whole show, because it would take a whole show, or not a whole show, but 20 minutes of the show at least. I believe that Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada easily go to Joe Biden. I believe Colorado and New Mexico will most likely go to Biden. I believe Arizona might be a toss-up state. I have it read right now. Obviously, the Alaskans are going to vote for the president. I believe Hawaii goes to Biden. I believe Utah will go to Trump, Wyoming, of course, and Montana and Idaho. I believe North Dakota and South Dakota will, of course, go red. I believe Kansas will go red. I believe Texas will go red, barely, by Trump. I think it'll be a close race in Texas, just because the Austin area is so liberal, and we've seen that really uprising that within the last 4 years since the president got elected. But a lot of conservatives and stuff are influxing into Texas, as well as the ranchers and the farmers, and it's just a very conservative, always has been a very conservative state. I believe that Iowa will go to Trump. I believe Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Michigan, I believe will surprise us and go to the president again this year, just because of the again unconstitutional lockdowns by the Governor Whitmore. I believe Wisconsin might go Trump, but it might be again a toss-up state. I believe Wisconsin will ultimately go to Biden, but I believe Illinois definitely will go to Biden. I believe Missouri, as well as almost the whole South, will go to Trump, North Carolina included. I believe Pennsylvania will be a close run, but it's hard to tell with some of the election voter fraud going on within Pennsylvania and the state, and how they have extended their request for mail-in ballots, which may really affect the election post-election day. I believe New York will go, of course, Biden, Maine, as well as New Jersey, Delaware, DC, and all that, pretty much all that area. But I believe that the final, now, since the toss-up states will have Biden probably closer to 250 and the president closer to where he was before, I believe optimistically that 230 to 308, President Trump in a landslide. But I do believe we might see more of a Hillary Clinton close election, a little closer than Hillary Clinton, or a little more. I believe it'll be either a close election or a landslide election. I'm not really sure where to really see. I could probably tell you at the beginning of the night during our broadcast, once votes start to come in after the polls have closed. I could probably tell you where I think it'll go very early on. And if the states are looking close, like the first states that are confirmed or being on the verge of being confirmed, early projections, I will tell you if they're close, it might be a close election. If they're not totally close and one state is completely going for Biden, another one's completely going for the president, I believe the president will win a landslide. We will see. We will see what happens. This Hunter Biden thing really, I think, is going to play a huge role into what will happen in the future. Well, in the future with the Bidens when he's the sitting president. If he's a sitting president. I don't necessarily see Joe Biden as president of the United States. I really don't see him sitting in the Oval Office getting things done at all. I just can't picture it. I really can't. So that's why my predictions are the way they are. I see huge motivation for Republicans on this one. I think it may even be a Republican landslide. We might see another red wave. Now, let's be realistic. I think the Senate is going to be a closer race than people think. I think the Republicans will barely maintain the Senate. I think the Democrats are going to obviously have a landslide in the House, unfortunately. I'm being a realist here. And I do think that the president will win a landslide. These are my early predictions. We will see as we get closer to Election Day and Election Night, early predictions, where we're at, and then kind of go from there. But that's what I think is going to happen. But I hope you guys enjoyed this special election prediction Supreme Court Justice podcast, and hope you really, I like doing these pre-filmed podcasts because they kind of work a little bit smoother. I don't have to worry about too much of the technical side of things and the technical aspect of things to the point where it's overwhelming and so on and so forth. So I do thank you for listening. We're going to be going live election night, obviously. We're going to have a long broadcast. We're going to be out on the ground doing things there. We're going to be here at the studio celebrating if there is a President Trump victory, which we can only hope for. Now, before I go, I want to talk a little bit about what will happen if it's going to be crazy to think if the president does win and they do contest the election. Obviously, there's going to be immense pressure upon the president if they contest the election. There's going to be chaos like we've seen last year or last time, but more chaos, more riots, people throwing a fit, crying, of course, as we've seen with these whiny little bitches. And I don't mean to be mean, but people need to grow up. They need to get over, as the Democrats always say, elections have consequences. Well, the last election had a big consequence, and you guys paid the price. You paid the piper. Now deal with it. It's over. It's done with. Stop trying to contest it. Don't contest this one either. I mean, get over it. Stop being a victim. There's another election cycle in 4 years. Trump's not going to stay an extra 4 years. He's just trolling you. You guys need to learn how to take a joke. But obviously, the left can't even take a joke without getting offended. But I do see it would be weird if the Senate doesn't win the race and the House maintains Democrat and the Senate is Democrat. That would be a little weird for the president. I see a lot of executive orders coming. And I'm not a big fan of executive orders, if I'm quite honest with you. I don't think they're that great. But I do see a lot of executive orders coming if the president is reelected, which I hope not. And I think I see a more divided America, especially within the Senate and the House, if they are split between the two and President maintains his office, and I also see a more divided America if Joe Biden wins and the Senate keeps red and the House blue. We're still going to see that divide, but we'll have to see what happens, and we'll see election night. Join us. We'll be on Facebook Live doing the ground stuff and a little prep work, a little prepping for the election, and saying how everything's going and hearing things from different states and so on and so forth. I'll give you all the information and the rundown on that when that comes about. But until then, this is Daniel Gigo with the fightforliberty.com. This was an excellent episode. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to cut it all together. So we'll see you later. We'll see you on the flip side in about a week. And if there is any breaking news, such as there's a Tucker Carlson interview going down with the former Biden associate tonight, we'll see if there's any good things from there coming there about Hunter's laptop, so on and so forth. If there's any breaking news, we will be the first to go live as soon as that news breaks, and we'll go live on here on YouTube or on Facebook or wherever we need to go, fightforliberty.com. So we'll do that if you guys need us to do that. But until then, we will see you later. This is Daniel Cheek with fightforliberty.com.